My guest today is Zac Williamson. Zac is the co-founder and CEO of Aztec, a privacy-first layer 2 solution on Ethereum. We'll learn all about this today, of course, but welcome to the show, Zac.
Thank you. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
It is a pleasure. Let's do what we do at the beginning of the show, Zac. It would be super cool if you could please introduce yourself. I would love to hear a little bit of your personal and professional backstory. What have you been doing in the lead up to co-founding Aztec?
Yeah, good question. What have I been doing? What do I do these days? So Aztec is a privacy-first layer 2 network for Ethereum, basically where we're using advanced state-of-the-art cryptography to enable fully encrypted blockchain transactions where people cannot observe and snoop on what you're doing. I came into this space through a rather oblique way, you could say. I don't think anybody really comes to blockchain through a standard or traditional manner. We're usually a bunch of misfits. For my sins, I was an academic. I was a particle physicist trying to probe the fringes of reality in a domain called neutrino physics, and decided that I wanted to do something a bit more real with my life than measuring abstract particles. So I got into software engineering, got into programming, and that led me to blockchain. And through some chance encounters with a friend of a friend, I ended up becoming the co-founder of a blockchain startup in the space, which eventually morphed into Aztec. And the story about how that is quite a long one.
Well, I'm sure that's what we're really here to do, Zac, is to hear long stories about blockchain protocols. But just before we do that, I am fascinated. You said that you were a particle physicist in a past life, or maybe a few years ago. Just to explain again just what it is to be a particle physicist and what your, I guess, specialist branch of particle physics was.
Sure, happy to. So I did a PhD in something called experimental neutrino physics. So as you might be able to tell from the accent, I'm British, and I was very lucky that I was in a time in my life where the British government was willing to give me a small sum of money to basically just think about weird, hard problems in physics for a few years. Basically, so I was an experimentalist, which basically meant I was working with a very large experiment based in Japan. It's called Tokaido Kamioka. The Tokaido Kamioka long baseline neutrino oscillation experiment. So neutrinos are one of these fundamental particles of nature. From what we can tell, basically, we think there are 12 of them so far. Basically, there are these particles that we don't know how to subdivide. They seem to be sort of fundamental, and neutrinos are part of these, and they're weird. Because they are extraordinarily light, and almost nothing happens to them. For example, every second, billions of them are streaming through your little finger, because every particle of light produced by the sun produces a neutrino. And they don't seem to do very much, but they are the key to unlocking a lot of the fundamental mysteries of the universe, one could say. It's for me, I guess you could say it was my replacement for religion, because there are some very open-ended questions of particle physics. So if we can kind of resolve them, can open up a lot of new science, new knowledge that we currently have no access to. Think about the way the world was in the 1900s before Einstein came along with general relativity, before quantum mechanics was discovered, right? We're almost in that kind of state now where our existing models of how the universe works, they seem to all our predictions seem to fit reality, but our models are clearly flawed. They're in many ways. Anyway, measuring neutrinos can help understand where our models don't match reality, and because okay, so I'll try and wrap this up in 1 minute. There are 3 kinds of neutrino flavor states: electron, muon, tau. We just give them names. They have very different fundamental properties, and the weird thing about them is, as a neutrino, propagates through space, its flavor can oscillate. So you can create an electron neutrino and then measure it at some later point. And I measured a muon neutrino. That's a bit weird. That doesn't normally happen with matter. If you create a, like a helium atom and you measure it a bit later, it's going to still be a helium atom, right? And what my experiment was trying to measure was one very specific thing, which is if you create a muon neutrino and you measure it about 300 kilometers down the road, does it ever become an electron neutrino? Which seems very abstract. Right? Why is this important? It's important because if this value is non-zero, then it opens up some interesting new physics that could explain things like the matter-antimatter imbalance in the universe. For example, clearly, when the universe hit the Big Bang, when there must have been some kind of more matter than antimatter, otherwise it all would have annihilated and we wouldn't be here. But that's kind of weird, right? Matter and antimatter are supposed to be treated the same, or maybe not. The neutrinos are partially the key to that. They could be the key to dark matter, for example. And like the first step to really unlocking whether this is the case is, can muon neutrinos become electron neutrinos? And that was what we were trying to measure. And to give you an example of how hard this is, the experiment I was on, it was a multi-billion-dollar collaboration. It had like 600 people in it. And after 1 year of running the experiment, we had produced 10 to the 18 muon neutrinos, which is 100 billion neutrinos. Guess how many electron neutrinos we measured at our detector 300 kilometers away?
Well, I'm not going to guess.
Six. Six from 100 billion.
Yeah.
It was an insane experiment. And I was very I was very lucky to be a part of it for a few years. I was doing some relatively mundane data analytics work as part of that experiment. I was just a PhD student. But it was wonderful to be a part of that.
Well,
we did measure that number, that probability, and it was greater than zero, which is nice and exciting. It means that there's neutrino physics is still alive and well, and there's some interesting stuff to discover there.
Well, look, I'm glad to hear that, and I think it's nice to have for I guess a blockchain protocol co-founder. It's nice to have an origin story, if you like, based on particle physicists. It just kind of goes with it. So, but let's move to, I suppose, Aztec. You said there was speaking of origin stories, you said there was a kind of convoluted origin story for Aztec. Maybe just give us your version of how Aztec, reminding listeners, privacy first layer 2 solution on Ethereum, but how it came to be in the first place, Zac.
Yeah, totally happy to. But before I start, I just wanted to say, often, when you have a successful startup, and I'm not hubristic enough to say Aztec is successful yet, but I intend for it to be successful. Once we launch our network next year, you get these origin myths, that are basically nonsense, that I like to elaborate and raise the status of the founders as these pressing visionaries, when in the reality and the truth is much more mundane. I'm going to give you the mundane version of my origin story, which is, my original co-founder was a guy called Thomas Raymond Lefevre-Walton, and still a very good friend of mine. And he worked in the City of London. He worked in a market called mid-market debt, corporate debt, some pretty trad financial services sector. And he realized that blockchain, like Ethereum, could really help make his sector more efficient, because you had this classic coordination problem where lots of people need to cooperate and they all hate each other. They don't trust each other, which is perfect for a blockchain. So he set about doing that, and he needed a technical co-founder. And at the time, I was I was just bumming around as a software engineer, looking for, wanting to do something more interesting. And then this opportunity came up, and I'm like, wow, a startup. I come from the UK, not Silicon Valley, so that kind of thing was particularly in 2017 was a lot more exotic. And the idea seemed cool. I knew nothing about traditional finance, but I knew a little bit about blockchain. And at the time, 2017, I thought it was kind of scammy. And I liked Tom's idea because it felt like a real use of this. It wasn't a synthetic token. It was it was a real world use of this. But it was very transactional. like helping mid-market debt firms more efficiently handle their finances. No, there's no grand vision there. But in doing that startup, we realized quite soon that for this to work on Ethereum or any blockchain, you need really strong privacy protections to ensure that these institutions that are putting like multi-billion-dollar portfolios on chain, that they're not getting all of their orders sniped by competitors. Like, it's kind of fundamental. So that's why I started looking into privacy technologies, and this kind of whole realm of cryptography called zero-knowledge cryptography, zk-SNARKs. ZK is a catchphrase these days in Web3, but back in 2017 it was anything but. And I basically became a cryptographer to solve this privacy problem for my startup, which wasn't called Aztec, it was called Credits Mint, because we minted credits on the blockchain. A very new startup vibe there. And yeah, that's how I kind of got into privacy tech and cryptography.
Right. Well, I think it's be useful then, Zac, just if you explain why privacy, depending on where you live, why privacy is such an important, I guess it'll be an important narrative. It's funny because privacy was quite a big narrative, and it seems a long time ago, but maybe even like the kind of 2017 cycle in terms of privacy coins, if you like. I'm thinking the Moneros, Zcash, Dash, and so on. And people could very much understand the need for private transactions, but that kind of narrative, it kind of passed by and went out the window a bit. And some of those coins, particularly Monero, were delisted from some of the bigger exchanges. But there's still very much a need for people to be able to conduct private business, if you like, financial or otherwise. So, why do you think, from your perspective, why do you think privacy is so vital to what we do on blockchain protocols, and why do you think it'll be, important in Web3?
Yeah, totally. Let's break it down, because privacy means a lot of things, right? There's the surface level privacy, which is like what Monero does and Zcash does, where you can have a cryptocurrency that where the ownership of it is not known, which it was an important pioneering step in the development of these technologies, but that basically gets you to a world of private Bitcoin, which there's utility in that, but I want to create private Ethereum, and if you want to do something like that, then privacy means a lot more than just private tokens. It means programmable privacy, because, okay, if you go back to 2015, right, and you've got this cypherpunk vision of Ethereum, right, it's the world computer. What are we going to do with the world computer? We're going to recreate money. We're going to create, like, the plan, right? The vision was this community is going to recreate like traditional financial systems, but in a fully decentralized, permissionless way. You can be your own bank. You can provide high quality financial services to the developing world. You can transact with your own money on chain, and this is going to become a commonly accepted mechanism for payment everywhere. In the internet, in the real world, you're going to be putting your mortgages on chain. You're going to get your salary stream on chain, and you're going to have access to this entire universe of financial services that can be composed together and assembled together, despite them all being created by different people and networks and institutions. And that has not happened. Not really. In 9 years later. Why? I would argue it's because of the problem of identity. If you want to connect what happens on chain with what happens off chain, then you need identity. Instead of, like, right now I hold some crypto, right? But do I hold crypto? No. Like the public key OX, FE3229XB, whatever, that thing holds cryptocurrency. And if I want to link that to me, that's important if you want that wallet to hold more than purely synthetic assets that don't touch the real world. If I want to have my salary streamed into my cryptocurrency account, if I want to use my cryptocurrency accounts to make payments for things in the real world, then these services that I'm using need to have an understanding of who I am, because when you talk to the real world, then you are bound within these networks of obligation and responsibility in meat space. Now, this might be slightly controversial because this is not the original. This is what I'm about to say is not cyberpunk. It's in fact the antithesis of cyberpunk. If one goes back to the original cyberpunk manifesto, like the whole vibe of that thing is we are going to exist in online digital spaces where the traditional world and its institutions cannot touch us, and we are going to be free agents traveling an information superhighway. And what I'm saying is no, we are flesh and blood, bags of meat and bone. We live in the real world. We consume consumer goods in the real world. We buy and sell and rely on assets in the real world. And if our digital systems cannot reflect those transactions, then those digital systems have limited utility in the real world. And I want to change that. And that means linking who you are as a person to cryptocurrency accounts. So I can create, or anybody can create, a decentralized application that trades assets that are linked to things, to financial instruments in, say, the US or in the EU or in the UK. And that these decentralized apps, despite interacting with non-custodial wallets, despite the application not having any centralized actor itself, that application can still be compliant within the regulatory regime of wherever those assets are held. Like, to give an example, right, take token sales, right, ICOs, they fell out of fashion. Why did they fall out of fashion? Well, because there was this rather annoying regulation. And so nowadays, if you want to do an ICO, you have to go through regulated entities, right? Like where you can launch a coin, but before you get it listed on exchanges, like the people who initially can buy it, they have to be investors, which is undermines the whole point of crypto, which is supposed to be giving access to real equity in projects to real people instead of insiders. But if you can prove that you're a US citizen or a UK citizen on chain permissionlessly, if you can prove like that, you live in the US or whatever, permissionlessly, and you can prove that to a smart contract, then you can bring all the services back on chain. That's what we want to do. But so this is a very roundabout way of getting to it. To do that, you need privacy because you're exposing a huge amount of who you are on chain. Like you're putting in a smart contract thing like vital information that is basically doxing yourself. And if that can't be encrypted, it is useless. It's harmful. And so to really to get to the crux of it, to make blockchain mainstream, it must interface with the real world. To interface with the real world, we must be able to link human beings to cryptocurrency accounts, and that requires privacy tech. Without, if you don't want to splash crazy amount of information all over the internet, and that's what Aztec is doing.
Yeah, that's very well articulated. Thank you, Zac. It's interesting though. How would you characterize, I suppose, the wider state of the Ethereum community or ecosystem, whatever you want to call it? Obviously, it's a wide, vast, and diverse ecosystem with a lot of different players, developers, communities, protocols, layer twos, some all working harmoniously together, some competing with each other, and a whole lot of discussion on what is perhaps the best way forward or what is not. And then you've got kind of the competition from the other chains as well. So there's always a lot going on. But how would you characterize the kind of thinking in Ethereum in general in terms of, I guess, the ability to do what you're talking about, which is keep certain elements of your transaction and real life identity potentially separate from what you do on chain, versus the kind of radical transparency idea of blockchain itself?
I think that what I'm talking about and the principle of radical transparency are quite very, very complementary to each other. And the way I think about it is this. I want privacy for users and transparency for protocols. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that if you're creating a protocol on chain that where you are taking in, where you are providing some kind of service to users, so take a liquidity pool, for example, an AMM or some marketplace or a prediction market, I do think it's very important that what's going on is completely transparent there. As in, if you're being given a price as a user, you can understand how that price was achieved. you know that you're being dealt with fairly, and that like nobody's playing favorites. And for that, you need transparency. But I don't think that protocol should know who you are. Effectively, and this kind of naturally plays itself out in a network like Aztec, because in a network like Aztec, you have any kind of data which is owned by an individual can quite easily be encrypted. So my account balance, for example, or even what my account is. But if you have a protocol where you need this concept of global states, so things, what do I mean by that? I mean, like if you need a total token supply or a liquidity supply, values that are changed by transactions coming from multiple people, then the natural way that to work it out in Aztec is for that information to be public. And so when you build something like a DeFi exchange on Aztec under that model, what happens is that the exchange itself is fully transparent, as in you can see the token flows coming into the exchange, you know what's being traded, but what you don't know is who is trading. And this part is very important, going back to the identity part, because imagine that exchange now needs to apply some kind of checks and balances on who's interacting with it. So let's say instead of it being tokens, it's, I don't know, maybe it's US Treasury bonds or something, and like you need to make sure that the people buying it are not on a sanctions list. Well, then if you have identity protocols within that network as well, then those can be encrypted. So basically, I can come to an exchange and say, I am not going to tell you who I am. And I'm not going to reveal to you how much money I have on my assets, but I am going to perform a trade with you. And I can prove to you that I'm following the rules of your network, of your protocol. So like whatever checks you need to apply, I can satisfy them. And so that's an example of what I mean when I say privacy with the user, transparency with the protocol. And it's what the effective network like Aztec is that it enables products and services which currently happen in the traditional space, happen in Web 2, behind closed doors, behind data moats. It allows those services to be brought on chain. And not only that, but it allows much smaller players to provide those services. So instead of needing like the institutional heft of a large financial institution to provide, like real world loans or whatever it is, then you, in theory, a much smaller team could build that kind of technology on Aztec, taking advantage of all the other products and services that are being built, just like you can on Ethereum.
Yeah, very well said. And I can see, Zac, that you guys have a pretty good list of, I guess, partners, collaborators, investors, backers. Do you want to just kind of run through how that works in terms of who you're working with and who's backed you up?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we're fortunate to be backed by the I'm going to sound like a PR person, the best in the industry.
Yes.
I think one of the things about Aztec is that we are old. This is I got started in this in January 2017. So next month I'll be 8 years in this space. Basically doing the same thing. Like, I did 1 year of credit and then we pivoted. So 7 years of doing the same thing. So we've been able to choose our investors quite carefully, as in we wanted to make sure that the people who are not like on our who back us are kind of here for the long haul. They don't just want exit liquidity. They're very legitimate investors who have confidence that we're building something useful. So we have Ethereum Ventures. Originally it was Consensus. We were their first VC investment outside of their mesh. And then Paradigm led our Series A, and A16Z led our Series B. And we've been very, very very lucky with that. They've helped us immensely along the way. I came into this space as a academic and an engineer. Like, what do I know about being a CEO? Well, now quite a lot. Back then, not very much, right? And I had a lot of my co-founder had a lot of guidance and support from our investors. They've helped us navigate many, many tricky situations. In terms of the people building on Aztec, I believe the Electric Capital report came out. I think for the second year in a row, Aztec is the fastest growing developer ecosystem. One of the top 10 fastest growing developer ecosystems of Web3, which, considering we are pre-launch, I think is a good sign that we're onto a good thing here. Basically, you said before, the Web3 landscape can be pretty competitive, right? You have lots of L2s, trying to basically fight each other for liquidity, providing similar services. I think Aztec sits apart from all of that, because we're not playing the scaling game. Well, a little bit, but transactions on Aztec are never going to be the cheapest or the fastest, because we use some pretty heavyweight, hardcore cryptography to get our transactions done because they're private. But what we do have, they will be cheap, but not the cheapest. What we have is privacy. If you have an application or product or a service where you need to give your users some level of privacy, it's not an optional thing. It's not like you can opt into privacy, but just the nature of the service means you need privacy. So, Aztec is the natural home for what you're doing. And so we're finding this play out this year where, I hate to be, I'm going to be very judgmental here. I feel like one of the vibes of Ethereum this year has been stagnation, because what you can do with a smart contract has not changed that much in 5 years. Certainly the transactions are faster and cheaper, so that does enable more use cases for sure. But the actual innovation of what you can do, remember 2017, right? There was this famous Reddit post by the creator of MakerDAO basically going, "Hey guys, I think I've invented this digital money. I've got this crazy scheme to create a US dollar on Ethereum. I hope it works." And then you had the DeFi summer, and then you had all of this innovation with NFTs. But this is all being played out, and I might eat my words next year. Who knows what will happen? But the design space of what you can do in a smart contract has been very thoroughly explored now. And I think my sense was developers are thinking, what now? If you come to the Web3 space as a new developer, you've just come over with 1.2. What do? You learn about the ecosystem, and then you think, well, maybe I should build a DEX. But that's been done before. Maybe I build an NFT. That's been done before. There's not much new innovation that you can do. Well, you can on Aztec. By God, you can on Aztec, because we have this valuable primitive that doesn't exist meaningfully in any other layer 2, which is you have private state. As in, I can have it as a developer. I can write my smart contract where I have actual private data that only the user knows, where the user selectively discloses that data to either other people or smart contracts, and that enables radical things. So I'm taking this is a shaggy dog story. I'm taking a long time here to get to the bottom of it. In terms of people developing with Aztec, we have zk-Passport is always one of my favorites. They are basically you take your passport, it has a little chip in it, you can tap it to your phone, which has an NFC reader, and you can get a zero-knowledge proof of correctness that you possess a passport of a certain nationality. Where all of that information within your passport, your photograph, your passport number, blah 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 blah, you get to selectively disclose that. So I can use that to solve the classic example of proving I'm over 18 and zero knowledge, proving I'm not on a sanctions list because I'm not Iranian, I'm British. I'm using that as an identity primitive. Another one which I'm really excited by is the Anoncast app, which has kind of been making the rounds lately. It's one of these things where, so for folks who aren't aware, what Anoncast is it allows you to post to Twitter and Farcaster anonymously. Basically, Anoncast uses our zk programming language and our technology Noir to basically allow you to prove that you possess a Twitter account. I think, or proves that you prove that you possess some. I think it's Anoncast tokens, and that proof is enough to then broadcast your tweet via the Anoncast account, which basically means you can do anonymous Twitter posting, which is very refreshing. It's one of these ideas where when I saw it, I was like, "Why? I wish I'd thought of that. It's genius." And they built it I think they built the zk part in a weekend with Noir, which is it really warms my heart because if I were to use zero knowledge technology in 2018 to build that kind of thing, it would have taken me 6 months to a year. Anyway, those are two examples.
All right. Thank you, Zac. Well, look, as we begin to finish up this part of the podcast, then for anyone listening, whether, developers, investors, people that, can see certainly the need for on-chain privacy. What is the best place for people to go to begin to learn more about Aztec if they're not already familiar? What should they do? Where should they go, Zac?
I'm literally typing in my own website just to make sure I'm not getting it wrong because I'm paranoid. www.aztec.network. So that's the source. So there we have all of the links to go to things like we have our documentation, docs.aztec.network on how to get started with Aztec and Noir. We have links to our Discord. We have links to our Twitter, our blog. We also have links to our research. So we have a forum where we like to build in public. We like to air our dirty laundry. So when we have difficult research problems that we're trying to solve, we like to crowdsource that as well. So you can see what we're getting up to there. And what was the other one? Noirlang.org. So that is Noir, NOIR-LANG.org. That's the website of our programming language, Noir, where you can take, you can write a normal Rust-like computer program, and it gets converted into something which can be proved very, very efficiently, where you can hide information. So that's the technology that's powering the Aztec network, and you can build on that and use it today.
Yes, indeed. Aztec.network. The link, of course, is in the show notes, folks. Zac, it is time to finish off the episode, and we do that, of course, by running you through the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. Are you up for it?
Go for it. Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it, Zac. I'm just going to run some questions at you. I just want you to give me quick, kind of snappy answers. Hot take style is how we like to roll it. No right or wrong way to do it, but here we go. Question 1 for you. It'd be interesting to see what you have to say. Where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum, Zac?
Multi-chain opportunist.
Yeah, thought you might say that. Okay, well, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
Firmest conviction. If you are building a product or a service on Web3 and you are not facing very strong incentives to decentralize, either 1, you do not need a blockchain, or 2, you do not have product market fit.
I love it. Very well said. Okay, look, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. You'd be very familiar with that kind of thinking. 10 years, though, is a long time in a blockchain. So, yeah, 10 years' time, I don't know, Web3, what does it look like? Privacy, what does it look like? Anything you like. Just, Ethereum, 10 years' time.
Not sure about Ethereum. I'll talk about Web3.
Sure.
It will be the transaction infrastructure that underpins the entire world's financial activity. And the average person won't even be aware of it. We will be able to enjoy a global marketplace of the world's assets. These assets will all be brought on chain, and it's going to revolutionize how people transact with each other, how finance is done, how we organize as societies and groups.
Of course, I love it. A great vision. Another way of thinking about this, Zac, is one of my favorite quotes by sci-fi author William Gibson, who famously said that the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, Zac, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people are not aware of it?
This is a bit trad, but the idea of a non-custodial cryptocurrency wallet, where I can send you peer-to-peer payments without any intermediary getting involved. Like for 99% of people, that's still not their lived experience. And if you're in the space, it is yours.
Yeah, that's right. Indeed. Brings us nicely to the final question, Zac, which is, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or TV show?
Oh, that's tricky. The one that comes to mind, you said quick take, was The Player of Games by Ian M. Banks.
Oh, fantastic choice. Yeah, well, he's a great author, but I haven't read that. But that's a great title, The Player of Games.
yeah, very memorable book from my teenage years. I can't say it's objectively the best, but that's the one that came to my mind.
Nice. All right. It's a nice place to finish, Zac. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Just to finish, just to take it out, tell people where they can find you on X or anywhere else you like to hang out online. And again, just shout out the website for Aztec.
Yeah, you can find me at Zac_Aztec. Wait, no, I changed my name. I'm Satoshi now. Satoshi with a Z instead of an S. Yeah, that's how I hang out on Twitter. And you can find us at work instead of shitposting at Aztec.network.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zac. All the best, and bye for now.
Thanks for having me on, Andy. Cheers.